Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Let me see. How's everyone doing today? Thank you guys for being on time. Sorry I was a little late. Let's see, getting the chat open. How's everyone doing today? Where are people dialing in from? For those who haven't joined one of these sessions before, I really like to be interactive. Hey, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everyone joining. Sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning here. It wouldn't be a live stream without it. And so we use Riverside James, honestly, for the post-production, and Zoom records things in very low quality. And we're able to live stream. So we're actually live on YouTube and Twitter currently. And so this allows us to, be able to go live and attract a wider audience, because we get a lot of our viewers from Maven, but also from socials. And if you're not following on socials already, feel free to. We post a lot of good content here as well. Okay, cool. Let's dive into things. So today we're talking about how to automate B2B teams LinkedIn with Claude. And so, founder-led content and posting content from your executive account has been a really great way to generate inbound interest and inbound leads for your business. This has been a trend for the last couple of years, and more people have gone into it. But the component that has started to evolve, or the evolution of this, has been getting your entire team to be able to post. The obvious benefits of this are more opportunity to post great content, which gives you a wider and bigger opportunity to reach more people. And then everyone has their subset niche and perspective. And so you get this really human, personal experience from a brand that a brand account could never replicate. So today we're going to be talking about how we can do this, because the last thing that we want is to have employees feel like they're content creators on top of the work that they already need to do. And the reality is that no one will post if it just feels like work and there's no obvious way or obviously reason to be able to do it. And we can run this whole system in Claude. And so you can make a really efficient system for your team. And so if you're a head of marketing or a content creator already, you maybe have already tried to encourage your team to post content on their own. And what happens, especially in this era of AI, is that everyone says, sure, and they start posting. And while output maybe doubles, you actually start to see engagement drop. And that's because people don't have the right system or the right structure to know how to write good and effective social copy. Um, or they're just going right into ChatGPT, producing something on first pass, calling it done, and sending it back to you, and saying, here's a done product, and then you have to spend the additional time to rewrite it. And so what we want to do, um, what we want to do is actually be able to build a system that your team can plug into. And so you can service the ideas, you can tell them exactly, what the angle you want, and all you need is to be able to gather their perspectives. And the interesting thing about this is if you use tools like Gong or another Fathom or a way to record your notes, you can actually be able to pull their perspectives in automatically without having to pull them for an interview every time. This is what makes this system fully agentic versus something that adds more work. And we'll show you how to do that in later slides. A little bit about me and why I, have an opinion on this. We run a go-to-market growth agency. We have focused on executive thought leadership and specifically LinkedIn content for the last 3 years. Um, I personally have built my brand on LinkedIn to over 18,000 followers, and we've had a chance to work with some of the most fastest growing startups in B2B over the last couple of years. And so what we've done is we've taken the learnings from all of these clients and distilled them into this process. And what's cool is we've had this frontline view into how Claude has been evolving. And so we've been updating our best practices in real time to show you guys how to run this for your own. So what we're gonna do is talk through why context beats prompting. I think a lot of people get obsessed with writing the perfect prompt, but if you're really using Claude effectively, you're not prompting at all. So how we can use context to create better prompts, what your weekly workflow will be, so how we can come up with content ideas, how we can write effective hooks, and how we can triage it to end in the entire process, and then how you can actually deploy this for your team. So starting next week, you can have a fully operational system without additional overhead. So the first thing that we need to wrap our head around is context, right? What is the context going into the post itself? Because if you just give Claude a basic prompt to say write a LinkedIn post on a certain topic, it's going to pull from all its generic knowledge of the internet and it's going to give you a really generic response. And what separates the people who are posting effectively on LinkedIn and the people who are not are the ones who are offering true perspective and true opinion. And that needs to come from the subject matter expert themselves. And so what we need to do is build in a system that not only writes the LinkedIn post, but is actually continuously aggregating that context and that information into the Claude system to create more effective posts. So what the input is your team's belief and voice documented once and reused every week. Asterisks that should be documented every month and reused every week. So we constantly have a new source of input. Again, the advanced version of this will use sales calls and internal calls to actually be that internal, net new input into the system. Then we have the engine, which is going to run through Claude, and it's going to draft your point of view. It's going to draft from your point of view or your team's point of view, not from a blank slate. And then what the output we get is posts that sound exactly like your team, which means they are specific, they're opinionated, and they're on brand and in line with your brand values and mission. We have a few tools, and I'll be linking to a resource pack at the end here. But essentially, what we want to understand and what the audit we ran was how blank prompts, performed versus prompts with a belief. And so, the more point of view with concrete specifics, the more we've matched your voice, the stronger the hook, and the more ready to publish the post is, gives this system its life. Because if you are lacking on any of these things, you will never have a team that's effectively posting content. So let's talk about beliefs, hooks, and how we can run this workflow. So on brand content ships every week when these three things run together. Without one of them, the entire system breaks. First, we need to give Claude a point of view. Claude, by definition, has a little bit of a perspective and a little bit of a personality. And that's when we say we see AI slop. That means that the content that is being produced is truly from Claude's point of view, which I think we all recognize as very generic, basic content at this point. And so we need to create a document of beliefs. Some people call them spiky point of views. We refer to them as beliefs here, similar to content pillars. But we need to document the perspectives that we share as a company and share as an individual to be able to then tailor the content to speak about your market, your customers, and your product effectively. Once we have this, Claude's able to draft from that point of view every time instead of guessing. And this is the fastest way to getting an output from sounding generic to sounding on brand. The next part of the system is generating 10 openers. Hooks are, a huge game within their own. They make up about 75% of whether a post will perform or underperform just from the hook. And so while the contents of the post are very important, how you package it and how you hook someone's attention is even more important. And so what we want to do is we want to package the same idea 10 different ways. And that way we can start running some tests to understand, okay, how can we actually capture the attention from our audience? Once we do this, we'll have it generate 10, rank them based off of past performance, and then pick the top three. And so what we're able to do with AI here is we're able to hit volume plus a filter that's using data to actually make educated assumptions on what will perform. The next thing is if you've spent any time posting on LinkedIn, you'll understand that posting is half the battle. What the other half of the battle is actually commenting and actually inserting your opinions and your beliefs into conversations. And so what we can do with the same belief system is we can use it to build and actually create comments rooted in your team and your perspective that contribute to the conversation that's already happening on social. So the system every week will be a belief sync. This can be on a weekly basis or monthly basis. We would recommend weekly, where you can pull your customer calls into Claude. If you have again, this can be anything: support tickets, customer calls, um, customer interviews, excuse me. And then what you can do is you can take them and extract them into beliefs. This will also run through a filter of what your company stands for. What problem are you solving in the market? Because with any good story, there is a hero and there is a villain, and you are the hero saving, or actually, you are the guide saving your users, enlightening them to be a hero and saving them from a villain. And so, what we need to do is really set and understand what these beliefs are. The next step will be drafting the hook. So, turning each of those beliefs into 10 ranked openers, using data and past performance to keep the top three, create a draft that gets pushed to a human. This is our human in the loop step, where then you are able to review and polish. The next level of this is sending your feedback into the hook drafter. So it can continue to refine your voice over time. Again, this is what makes it truly agentic. And then once you start getting comments, making sure that we're triaging the ones that are worth responding to and responding to them in a not automated way, but drafting them so that you can manually respond to them. Here are three prompts that you can steal and run immediately. First is the belief extractor. So what you do is you put in a sales transcript or customer call transcript. and have it list 10 specific beliefs that the company holds about their market, making them one sentence each, grounded in something the customer actually said. A hook generator. So write 10 LinkedIn opening lines for this belief, insert the belief from the previous step, making sure to vary the angle, and then rank them 1 to 10 on how likely your specific ICP is going to stop scrolling, and explain the top three, right? So you can see how we're using OpenAI's or Claude's Opus logic to actually prioritize and create a ranking system on what is going to perform the best. Um, then you can pull in the comments that you get. You can just paste them in and sort into reply later, and ignore, and then have it draft a reply in my voice for each reply now using my belief document. So you can see we have this belief document at the top that really grounds every content and every comment that we're creating from it. So we need, with AI, you always need to keep a human in the loop. And so we need to make sure that we're keeping a human review step in here to be able to make sure that the content being produced and what we're actually creating is still accurate. Maybe in the evolution of AI, we'll be able to get further away from this. But right now, the one thing that AI does not have is taste or perspective. And so we need to feed Claude essentially forced perspective to be able to try to simulate having a belief. So what we want to do is feed Claude beliefs before you ask it to post. So we're not putting blank prompts that return generic drafts. We need then to generate 10 hooks and rank them. So we're not just publishing the first line that Claude writes. Next is keep each teammate's voice documented. So for each individual on your team, you can have their own set of point of views and beliefs. Therefore, we're not having one house voice that's just flattening everyone. And then edit for one real specific per post. So make sure that there's a number, a name, a customer quote, something that's grounded in something real. And again, so you're not just writing blank generic post, and we're not creating vague best practices. Um, Anyone have questions so far? I'm going to get through this so we can jump into Claude and start building this. But I really want to make sure that we understand the thought process here and understand why we're making these decisions, where we have to be rooting in context and belief into the content that we're producing. So the workflow that we're going to produce is going to be a simple skill, and it's going to run across our real accounts. And at the end of this process, you'll be able to run it on your own. This is the same workflow that we work across all of our accounts. We've worked with 150 different founders and have used all of our data and all of our insights to be able to build this system. And so it's definitely a proven system, and all it requires is one simple Claude setup. So let's jump in. The one last thing I want to touch on is AI search is becoming more and more important to have your company rank on. That is the go-to place where buyers are now starting their research process, which means when they go into ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or OpenAI or Gemini, they're typing in what is the best X for Y industry, right? What is the best AEO content agency for B2B SaaS? That is the number one cited search query, replacing whatever industry you're in. And unfortunately, if you're not in that list of results, you've completely lost your opportunity to show up on their ranking or show up on their short list. And so what we need to do is build an executive LinkedIn presence, which LinkedIn is quickly becoming one of the number one cited sources for AI search. And so while building a presence on LinkedIn can help support building inbound leads and acquiring new customers directly, it also is playing a large role in having your company be referenced and cited in LLMs. And so this is another reason that we focus so much on this. If you want to see how your company is ranking on LLMs and if it can find your LinkedIn profile, scan the QR code, run the audit, and it will tell you 3 specific steps that you can do to actually improve your citations and improve your ranking within just 30 days. With that being said, I'm going to jump into Claude and we are going to build this workflow. And please drop any questions or comments that you have as we do this so I can make sure that I'm tailoring this specifically to you. So you can see I'm in a new Claude Cowork project. And what we're going to do is we're going to come in and create a new folder. I actually already have a content system content strategy folder. But what we're doing here is we're just going to a folder on our local machine to be able to build this system. I also have my connectors set up. So you can see I have my connectors that allow me to connect to all my various tools. And the first thing we need to create is I need to create a file of truth for my company Catalyst and my perspective from my LinkedIn. These are going to be separate files and need to be set up so we can have multiple voices with different beliefs and different perspectives from our company. Create a core brand overview, beliefs, what we believe and no one else does, and our ICP for Catalyst, and create a specific and create another doc for Will that dials in his perspective more acutely. And then what I'm going to do is research from gotcatalyst.com. And then I'm also going to pull in my LinkedIn and say run an audit from of Will's perspective from my LinkedIn. And so what we're doing here is asking it to create the beginning of this system. And first we want to create the multiple documents that we'll need for every piece of content we create. Those specifically are my beliefs and point of view from Catalyst as a whole, my agency, and then also from my perspective. And you can see I set it up so it can run from multiple different perspectives from our company. And so a co-founder, one of our employees, I would input all of their profiles to create the starting place. The nice thing is this can build over time. And so as you conduct interviews, as you do webinars, as you record videos, etc., this document can be a living and should be a living document so that your beliefs and your perspectives are evolving over time. You can see that a lot of this already exists in this folder, and so it's going to try to not duplicate work, but we want to create new separate files alongside of these, and it's going to use data from Ordinal, which is pulling right from LinkedIn, and then brand is going to be shared truth, and Will is going to be personal override. And so it's just asking some follow-up questions to be able to create this more specifically to what we're doing. And it's going to run through now, pulling in the real data. You can see it's going to call a series of tools. So it's pulling Ordinal, which again is the tool that we use to connect to LinkedIn for posting. But it also can pull in my analytics safely. And then it's going to use web research to, or EXA for web research to find information about Catalyst. We also have a Catalyst connector in here, so it has some additional information. And maybe is asking for some approvals here. So we're going to let that run. In the meantime, anyone have any questions I know we have some active participants in here, which is amazing. So if you have any specific questions, is this making sense? Is this tracking? Any questions about the prompt or on connectors or how we're thinking about building this? I'm also going to drop the prompt here for anyone to use. No, no questions. All right. Well, we can just sit here and wait for a second. You can see what I like about Claude Cowork is it actually lists out, it first makes a plan and then it executes that plan. So you can see it did research on Catalyst. Then it's going to audit Will's LinkedIn perspective via Ordinal. Then it's going to write Catalyst brand truth file, then write Will's perspective file, and then verify files for drift and accuracy. And that's exactly what it's doing. And as these start being created, we'll actually start to see, we're going to start seeing these files populate here, which I always think is quite interesting. You can see it is explaining how it works, all in very legible, readable Markdown. And so it's saying like, look, we're going to have Catalyst brand. It's going to have company information. Then we're going to have Will's perspectives. And then it's going to be able to match Will's voice. And it's pulling all of this directly from our live connectors. This is why setting up and adding connectors is so important because it allows you to connect to all of these tools that you wouldn't normally be able to pull data from, which just gives all of these prompts more and more context. All right, let's see where it's going. So you can see it create the Catalyst brand as source of truth. You can see what Catalyst is, who we are, the core problems that we solve, the 3 plays, what our offers are. It can see it found our executive LinkedIn content program, who we usually serve at that stage, pricing, headline proof, our process, who our ICP is, what we believe, content without a capture layer and retargeting, our spiky POVs, so the contrarian layer, and then our proof points, and then off limits, right? So this is a really effective way to inject everything that we create. And then what we're going to do is it's going to go a layer deeper of understanding who I am. And so if you run this for, again, multiple people in your company, what you would want to do is create these perspective overrides for each individual. And now we have this full system. And so what we're going to do now, since we've set this baseline foundation, we're now going to build the system that we talked about. And so I'm going to actually use a tool called Whisper. It's a really great tool to be able to just speak and you can prompt it. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of it already. But what we can do is click down the function key and I can just speak into my microphone here and say, what I want you to do is build a system that can look at industry news and competitors on LinkedIn to, as well as pull from Circleback in my sales calls. So you can consistently come up with new ideas for things that are relevant and interesting for me to talk about on social. Once you have those ideas, we want to rank and score those ideas and then send them through the Catalyst brand perspective. And more importantly, this will be content for Will, so they need to be from his perspective. After that, we want to come up with 10 hooks using our hook best practices. And once you've created those 10, select 3 that you think our ICP will actually respond and resonate with. Once you have those, I want you to draft those in Will's voice and then post them. And the idea is I want this system to get smarter over time. And so when you go back and the next week surface new signals, we want to make sure that we're continuously using data to improve our outputs each week. So as you can see, I just brain dumped an entire idea. Oh, did LinkedIn add a connector? Oh no, that's a custom one. So what I did is I just brain dumped the entire workflow, right? The same thing that I went through in the presentation at the beginning of the beginning of this call. And so what it's going to do is actually pull in all of those steps every time that we want to do it. And what I want to do is I want to get to a place where we've run through the system start to finish and it's working. And then what I can do is I can save it as a recurring task or recurring skill. And so this just happens each week without me having to touch it, without me having to remember to do it. And this is where truly agentic work comes into play and how this system really scales without having to need people constantly using and constantly inputting every time and triggering the workflows manually. Yeah, Whisper Lux, we got a Whisper Flow fan. Anyone who hasn't used it yet, you actually get a free month of Pro if you use that code. So definitely take a look at that. Um, and yeah, it's really helpful. I mean, I use it all the time. Um, my typing words per minute is um, sorry, I'm just answering some of these questions now. Yeah, let's run it now. I think we have some time to be able to do this. So yeah, so Whisperflow is really cool. My typing words per minute is probably like 90, but my speaking words per minute is significantly higher. Um, I probably speak at like 110 or 115 words per minute. And so I can just dictate to my computer. And because I've started to build these systems, right, that we're talking about a content system here, because we've built systems and they are all are aware of each other, what becomes really powerful is now whenever I open a Claude Cowork session, it has that context we were talking about at the beginning, every time I'm accomplishing any new task. It truly is the closest to a Jarvis like system that I've been able to replicate. Um, there's a little confusion here because it is because I've built some of this already, so it's just trying not to do duplicate work, which I appreciate. But what we'll do is just say yes. I trust it to be able to figure out what to do. Yeah, great question, Lux. So we have a question about if we're integrating Granola or other note takers with Claude to keep updating Claude's knowledge. This is one of the biggest unlocks that I can recommend because we use Circleback, and you can see I have here Circleback connected as an MCP. And what's so powerful about this is as someone who sits on either sales calls, internal calls, or partnership calls all day, I am constantly giving advice, talking about my subject matter expertise, talking about my domain. And there is so much information and perspective and beliefs rooted in how I just naturally talk and talk about my, industry and my product. And so, I could sit down and try to remember all the things that I said, but anyone who's ever been kind of in a flow state of speaking before, you know that sometimes you're just, talking and it's coming from a place, of just pure knowledge. And so it's hard when you later go to sit down and kind of channel that again. But the nice thing is, if you're in the habit of recording all of your meetings, a lot of that is already in there. And especially as LinkedIn continues to prefer real experiences, lived experiences, um, then there's so much information that can be used from that. So, long winded way of saying, yes, absolutely connect your note taker. And that's what's happening here. So, um, yeah, will you be able to share your prompt for ensuring recurring updates of Claude using it? Yeah. So you can do the same thing. So this skill we're building, Lux, actually already has this embedded. So you can see in the process, it's pulling a signals layer where it's pulling signals from industry news with Exa, and then it's pulling sales calls. So what it's going to do is it's going to look from the last time this thing was run, and then mine discovery sales calls for objection, pain points, non-obvious plays. And then, it's doing a de-identifying layer, right? So it's kind of anonymizing it. So we're not naming specific companies. But this, every time this workflow runs, it's doing this automatically. And that way, every week, it's looking at all of my calls, all of the things that I've talked about, and it's pulling it into these content ideas for me. It's then looking at ideation. So from the signal pool, we're going to generate 8 to 12 candidate ideas. Each idea must be something only Will and Catalyst can say. So proof, lived experience, proprietary data, not just generic thought leadership. And for each of it, it's going to come up with an angle, a thesis. It's going to target one of the ICPs that we go after. It's going to frame it in jobs to be done. Then my catalyst pillars and proof points, and then what signal it came from. It's going to score and rank them, generate 10 hooks, select 3, and then it's going to create some drafts. And it's going to push it directly to Ordinal. And then it's going to close the loop. And so what was chosen, why, hypothesis being tested, and use that for the next run. And so then the next time that this process runs, it has the context being built over time. And you can see in this entire thread, all I've done is done these 2 prompts that I really didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about. I just brain dumped what I was trying to accomplish, and it was able to put it together. And you can see it's creating much more, right? It's creating this whole scoring rubric that I didn't tell it to make specifically. I just said I wanted it to be scored. And creating this whole system on how it's going to evaluate, and creating its own documents for more context on how it knows what's going to be effective and what's not. And what's nice is it does a first pass, and maybe it's going to need tweaking. So what I'm going to do is, once I see the output, I'm going to say I want to change X, Y, and Z the same way that you would train a new employee. And then it will go into its own documentation and make updates. So here's the first run of signals. So it's finding statistics on industry news, the answer economy. 51 B2B software buyers now start with research with an AI chatbot more than Google, up from 29% in 2025. What an incredible hook. And then it's saying 89,000 LinkedIn URLs cited across ChatGPT search. So this is what I was talking about before, where LinkedIn is quickly becoming one of the best performing channels to be ranked on LLMs. And then a few different things. It's looking at my sales calls. So, I was talking to a payments prospect, a fintech prospect, infrastructure client, own performance. It's looking at mine. And now it's showing, it's pulling in the ideas. So interesting. The 10 hooks. The ones that are selected. And then written and complete post. And now they are added to Ordinal, which is just a scheduling tool that I use, but you could send them right to LinkedIn. Now, the only feedback, I like the ideas. I like the data that's being pulled into them. What I don't particularly love is the writing style. Some of it's good, but there's definitely some telltales of AI. And so what I'll do from now is just give some feedback on the writing style, which will go into my Will writing style, which is over here. And make some adjustments. And then I'll probably have it try to rewrite them again, post them. And the nice thing is everything will continue to evolve over time. And what's cool is all of these posts are based off of something I've actually done or a perspective I actually have. And so we have so much more high impact content. And you can do the same system for every member of your team. And you can see it even knows, because I want to run this as a task, it's scheduling it as a weekly task. So now this will run at 8:30 a.m. every Monday without me doing anything. And if I get it to a place where I think the content is high quality, I can just have this auto post. And I never have to think about posting on LinkedIn again. I hope this opened your guys' eyes on some ways to use agents. This is one really effective one to just produce really high quality content. And there's so many different ways that you can build on this and evolve. I'm here to answer any questions you guys might have. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to see how your company is ranking AI and AI search, take a look at this link. Again, one of the largest indicators and biggest contributors of how companies are ranking is coming through LinkedIn right now. But you still need to have the technical component on your website, and you still need to be producing long form content on your website. LinkedIn is just driving more traffic to the LLMs. So take a look, run an audit. I'm happy to do a free session with you guys to just run through how you guys can make some improvements on your own. And yeah, I hope this was helpful. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'm always open to answering questions. The more specific the questions, the better. All of the sessions that I do here come from people asking specific questions, and I just building sessions on them. My profile is Will Leatherman. I talk about AI growth and specifically winning on AI search with LinkedIn and executive thought leadership. So yeah, thank you guys for joining. Hope to see you guys on the next one.